liberty, and justice for all.
Notice of this meeting has been provided as is required by Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, with respect to the Home News Tribune, to publish the same. This announcement must be entered into the minutes of the meeting. For those attending today's meeting, please be aware that all board meetings are recorded via audio. Roll call, Maria.
Chairman Engel.
Here.
Commissioner Franklin.
Present.
Commissioner Katz.
Here.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Here.
Commissioner Benjamin. Here.
Adoption of the minutes of September the 2nd.
Move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Chairman Engel.
Yes.
Commissioner Franklin.
Yes.
Commissioner Katz.
Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin. Yes.
Under old business, early voting discussion. Tom, you want to start?
Okay.
Or Don?
Or Tom, did you want to?
No, I mean, if you want to.
Okay.
Turn it on.
There's an issue in terms of staffing. A couple of things. One, my understanding is we're supposed to have eight Republicans and 8 Democrats on each day in each polling place. So I didn't even mention that in my email, but we have, on a number of these, we have like 14 people listed, or 10 people, or certainly more than 8 on each. Is there some reason for that? They're not all going to work.
Just that the list is fluid. There are people who are being scheduled and canceling at the same time, and that we'll be working to make sure that there's parity between both parties for the early voting.
So we have them listed, but they're even though there's, I'll just pull this as an example. In East Brunswick, on Wednesday, October 27th, there's 10 Dems listed. Are we going to say if all 10 want to work, 2 of them say go home? Or are we going to let them know beforehand not to work?
I mean, I think in that case we would let them work if there's
But
just
then
10.
why are we putting in more people in the polling place on that day than we're supposed to?
Because I would say at this point we don't know if we have confirmed. Again, there's one thing to schedule, but it's another thing to confirm you actually have 8 people per party in each polling station.
They're listed there as working, which is fine.
Yeah.
As long as before the election day, we say, okay, we confirm we have 8, let's say there's 10 people there. We've confirmed 8, they're definitely working, then we should tell these other 2 people that we don't need them at that location on that day. Perhaps we can use them somewhere else.
Potentially, and then again, I would say we need 16 at each site per day.
We
So,
need an equal number for each party.
but if I only have 4, and again, looking at the sheet, I think you'll see that there is for the most part there is parity across the early voting sites in terms of party representation on days. There are days where it fluctuates, but if we need 16 people, we need 16 poll workers at that location. I would ask again through the party and the local chairs to make sure we have the Republicans needed for those early
Yes,
voting.
it is not permitted by law to put a Democrat in a Republican position on public election day, or a Republican in a Democratic position on election day. The law provides that if you can't find a Republican poll clerk or a Democratic poll clerk, then you can pick an unaffiliated to fill that if it's absolutely necessary. That's only after you check the other one. So 10, either way, like I don't want to just stay on the Democrat side. In October 30th in East Brunswick, it has 10 Republicans listed.
Yeah.
Well, and 9 Democrats, it should be 8 and 8. So it shouldn't be more, assuming they confirm, those 2 extra Republicans shouldn't be there, as should not the one extra Democrat, because it's intended to be 8 and 8. And you cannot substitute, legally, you cannot substitute a Democrat poll clerk for a Republican or Republican poll clerk for a Democrat.
But I mean, I would say the concern would be is that if and again, scheduling as it is saying today we have 8 and 8, and then the day or a couple of days before someone says I can't do that day, and then having that. So I would say it's not a confirmed static list. It's fluid, and that we would be sharing the list as we move forward with the commissioners and with with the chairs to review the list to make sure that we have equal party representation.
Yeah, well, we should just be, I absolutely positively understand the concept of having extra people because people drop out. We all know that. We've all had that experience. Everybody here that has done that from poll clerks has that experience. So having extra people is excellent, but telling people the day before or something saying, we have you listed, but you're not working because we have too many people, it's not a great thing because you'll never get it back.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Thank you.
Handle?
I would hope that the Board of Elections has the name of the person either at each polling location or that the clerk from each municipality would have a much more specific schedule than the one that is listed here. I'm not saying we shouldn't have 10 names, but if I was responsible for setting up poll work, I don't want to feel I have to start calling 10 people the night before. I'd like to know that those persons know they're coming on a Monday or a Friday or whatever the case may be. So if they sent you that list of 10 persons.
No, it is per, the list is not just 10 just for that. It is every day we have
It's all different.
it's a number of different people.
But you're giving me numbers and that doesn't make sense.
If the commissioners have the full list of all the names and addresses and who's working at what time slot, I sent it to you guys.
I'm not saying, what I'm saying is why does the list come out with so many extra persons then? And the explanation is we don't want to be held short? That makes no sense.
But
Why do you need 6 extra people in case somebody doesn't show up?
It sounds like Gwen wants to talk.
Yeah.
Since Gwen's doing it.
Yeah, go ahead.
May I?
Please.
Because you know I'm agreeing with you,
There are extra people because at the time, when the request went out for the early voting poll workers to obtain them, I believe it went, my understanding, it went to each county chair, and they were to pass it on to their designees and or their chair people. I will tell you, there was a huge response from the Democratic designees and chairs. I called those lists first. Whoever I could not get, they went on a message list. Then people were calling in. They were filling the spots, so I couldn't even use them for the Democratic, list. Because there was such a huge response, I was filling it. I got maybe one list from the Republican chairs.
It's not clear to me that we were supposed to send them to locals and request that part.
Well,
I sent a general concept.
Right, I never got it.
can I just finish how I got to these huge numbers?
Yeah.
Okay, so they were calling, I asked them, have you been a poll worker before? They said yes. I then say to them, what party do you typically represent? They would say Democrat or Republican.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and why would someone say they represent the Democrats if they represent the Republicans? They typically would not. So I filled them in on that spot. I have turned people down who said, oh, I represent the Democrats, but if you have openings for the Republicans, I'll say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I fill within where they are represented.
Well, there has to be, as, when I got the list from Linda of the people actually appointed, I just pulled out semi-random 6 Republicans who were listed as working for the Republicans or representing the Republicans that were working full days at 2 or 3 towns. Of the 6 representing Republicans, one was a registered Democrat, and another one had never voted in a Republican primary and voted in 2 prior Democratic primaries, and suddenly is now a registered Republican. Presumably they changed to do this. So at least one is absolutely cannot represent the Republican Party, and the second one probably should not.
Well,
And I don't know about the others.
If
So
I
I'm
could,
just-
Some staff member should check if they're gonna be, if they're representing the Republican Party or representing the
Commissioner, the
Democratic
question
Party.
becomes, do you want the
Yes.
positions filled?
Yes.
No,
But I like
let me finish my question. Do you
Wait a
want the
minute, one at a
positions
time.
filled, or does the name or brand that you're putting on it that much more important to you? In other words, I believe if you have extra persons and you want to make sure the polling booth is open, you allow that to happen.
It is not permissible by law to
That's why
have-
the person changed their,
And that is not permissible because they're really not a Republican if they change from, if they are a registered
Permissible
Democrat.
by
gonna
law, or
discuss-
just not required by the Republican Party. It's very difficult to look up vote history on a specific poll worker to determine the length of their party affiliation.
But you can
That's
provide,
impossible.
you can provide, if there's a question, you can provide that to us. I was not
If
looking
you're
up.
telling me for a specific person, absolutely, but to require Gwen to go through every single
No.
person to do their,
And I was-
it's impossible. Moving forward, she's making sure that they are of that party, but how do we research that they
Well,
voted how many times in the Republican Party to allow them to
Of
work?
the 6 people that I looked at, one was a registered Democrat, that's for sure. Unless they changed in
They might
the
have
last
changed their
month,
party. Correct.
But
all right?
if I could just break in, I mean, we did have a conversation post your email between myself, Gwen, Linda, and Valerie, and kind of reviewed that, and yes, I mean, going forward, you know, Gwen will at some point check party affiliation to determine, again, that a Republican is in a Republican position. And that it would be, you know, the party is right, that if they want, obviously they wouldn't want a Democrat as a Republican early voting poll worker and vice versa. So that, you know, and then the other thing we would share on a list would be is how they were referred, whether it was a self-referral, whether it came from a party chair, or it came from a commissioner, or municipal clerk, and so on and so forth. The issue then, again, I agree with Linda and Gwen, would be is the standard to which someone is a Republican or a Democrat to which we would hire them for early voting. I don't know the threshold. You know, some converts from one party to the other are more diehards than people who've been with the party for 20 years. So I don't know the threshold, and I wouldn't want to ask Gwen to make that determination.
Well, there were,
I
of the
had
6,
the
there were
reverse.
another, yeah, I'm sorry.
I have the reverse situation. I have 2 of my longtime Republican poll workers on the Democratic list in Edison. So I have the opposite situation. And I sent an email to Loretta this morning or to give me the voter history so I can be sure,
and why they switched?
and I haven't got a response
Well,
yet.
there
So I
was-
just texted her.
Sure, but I mean, you know, again, this would be part of the process, is that we would share that list of the early voting poll workers with you and the party, so that they can review the list and let us know, again, that, you know.
I mean, I was extremely pleased, I was pleasantly surprised when we got the raw numbers for the things, because I had thought we were having more problems in terms of filling the numbers. According to this, we weren't.
Right.
But then that's why I wanted to look at the things, because I wanted to make sure the people that were listed as Republicans were Republicans. I'm assuming the Democrats would like to make sure that the people that are listed as Democrats are Democrats.
They just want people to
And
hear
Commissioner Aldridge, at one point, I would say we were probably, well, I wouldn't say we're the only county, but I would say we're one of the counties that are actually pretty good in terms of
Ready.
what recruitment for early
I
voting
understand that.
election day. And I like to thank
Assuming
Gwen and
these
her
people
work.
are members of the parties that they're shown as.
Yeah.
Dan, you wanted to say something?
No, I guess on the numbers, what my question is that, do we do any splitting of any times?
Oh, yeah, lots of.
No, because that's why you might get more than, what I'm saying is somebody might be working from, the reason you have more poll workers
Six
could be.
to 6 to 11.
6 to 11 or something like that. It could, no, I'm just saying it could be. I'm not saying that, but if that's the case, you should really be listing it for us to, okay, if it's not the case, that's fine. Though it's not that, okay, fine.
People can only work certain.
No, I know, but Gwen's saying it's not a split day. It might be, they're not working 8 or 9 days straight, but it might, there's one poll worker working the full day, no splits.
Yeah, we told them to have a full day.
Oh, that's fine, I just want to make sure for clarification.
And I'm assuming we have no college-age students doing early voting,
believe so.
right? Okay. I mean, yes, poll workers, but
It's complicated, I recognize it's complicated enough as it is, starting to split the days past the, split the 9 days and half days as well as even further mind-boggling.
That we would just.
I know, it's further
don't be
mind-boggling.
still, it's not.
Okay. Well, we're gonna need, I don't think I'm gonna be sitting there and looking at every one of the Republicans in terms of this, because that's another story
But you
as
just
well.
did.
Hmm?
You just did.
I did look, I pulled 6 out of what could be 700 poll worker days. Roughly 600 to 700 poll worker days. I pulled out 6.
So if I may, Linda sent us the list of poll workers, and if the commissioners, and if we can as commissioners, or as our sphere of influence, give it to our chairs, county chairs, whatever we want to do, the list is there. The list is transparent as can be. If you don't want them on, then you got to let our poll worker coordinator know you don't want them on. If there's a problem, you got to tell them that.
But we
Okay?
just got the list, so
Okay,
I looked
but
at it.
I understand, but
identified that
we're
there's a
still,
problem.
we're
Yes.
still ahead of the game right
Yes,
now. It's
yeah.
October 7th, so we're still ahead of the game.
Yep.
Okay.
Please know that they've already been scheduled for training.
Yep.
So if you're gonna decide that they're not
Well,
working,
I'm not going to have a Democrat, a hard, characterized as a hard Democrat, all Democrat voter.
Don, I can't qualify a hard Democrat or a hard party member.
All right.
I can't do that.
I have, one of the 6 people I have is listed as to represent the Republican Party in New Brunswick as a Republican poll clerk. He is a registered Democrat, and he regularly votes as a Democratic.
That is understandable if they're a registered Democrat.
Yes.
That is understandable. But that's 1 out of 700.
No, it's 1 out of 6 that I checked.
Okay, then you're gonna have to check the other
Well,
694.
we got this list 2 days ago, or whatever it is.
What am I gonna do with September? That's different than the, I understand the need to have one page, but
I do have one other thing.
I'm not gonna
I
run
would- Who are we, who are we supposed to, I had gotten a few things and I directed them directly to Gwen. Is Gwen supposed to get everything, like the 700, 1,400, or 1,300 poll worker days, it all goes to this one person? I mean, I'm happy to continue that, but I don't know if she's one person.
It's filled.
she has assistants, people are helping her
Okay,
in the
it's
office,
not
but
filled. It's filled with names, but it's not filled with people that are necessarily from the party they're supposed to be in. There may need more.
yeah.
then I'm assuming whoever's
For
doing your phone
example-
calling should be, should be spoken with, I know that's any other preposition. Speak to whomever that is and get some more names in, obviously. If it's that big of a concern.
I
The
think
concern from the board is to make sure the positions are filled.
We have
and that-
election day concerns also. I
Thank
know
you.
we're focusing on
You're
early
nodding,
voting, but
right?
we have election day concerns also.
Right. And if we can't get, and if it's a Republican slot, and you can't get a Republican, ultimately, the law says you can get an unaffiliated. It doesn't say you put a Democrat in a Republican slot, or
And you only have
vice versa.
Democrats.
Or vice
But then you're
versa.
gonna complain if somebody becomes an unaffiliated 2 days before.
Well, we'll have to look part of it up. But they should, but when they come in and they say what they agree.
May I make a suggestion? It appears, and correct me if I'm wrong, that for early voting, we're in, I'll just call it relatively good shape. I'm saying relatively, that's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Okay. On election day, we are not in relatively good shape. So what I need, if we could, from the staff, coordinators, is to send a memo to the commissioners, to the chairs, that we are, and I'll use adjectives, whether they are or not, we are grossly behind in Republican, Democrat poll workers for these towns. You have to commit yourselves to filling.
I can send that to you.
Pardon me?
Send you the list of
I
the
know,
towns that
Linda,
we're
I know that, but I'm saying Commissioner Katz is saying that what he's focusing on is law that says, and I'm not saying go against the law, that if we don't have poll workers on election day, he's saying you can't put in an extra Democrat in as a poll worker to a Republican position.
Okay, so you're asking me to take the list by polling location and determine how many Ds and Rs like I did the early voting
Well,
centers?
I know, you've got lists from, there's 2,
This is early voting.
looks like about, no,
This is early voting.
this one, no, that's not the early, this list just says who you have assigned poll worker list from for election
Oh,
day.
yeah, correct.
Yeah, so
But
it
it's
looks
not a
like,
breakdown.
uh,
We have received
Looks like
some
you have
lists
about
over it, but
10 or
not,
12.
they might not be even.
No, you're about 10 or 12 or 20, of 50 slots, if you will, that you don't have
Right.
yet.
Right.
So we have to yell at those chairs.
That's why we voted
Right.
to you,
Yes.
Right,
especially Woodbridge Republican.
right.
I have a question.
Madam Chair, there's a question at the end.
I have a question. Just going back to the list in the early voting. If we're supposed to have equal amounts, okay, which is supposed to be 8 and 8, right? Why is it, I can understand why it is, but if we could change it, like there's 15 people in Edison Senior Center, 15 Democrats and 9 Republicans. But yet in East Brunswick, there's only 4 Democrats and 9 Republicans. Couldn't you steer some of those 15 Dems to go to work in East Brunswick?
For that day.
They don't want to
They don't want to move out of there. I try everything I can. They'll go on a waiting list prior to, before they will move one town over. I will,
So out of that out of the 8 what is it, the 6 or whatever, they're considered like a waiting list then?
no, they're on. But if I tell them, let's say right now I'm getting a lot of phone calls for Democrats, let's say in certain days in Edison. I don't have the chart in front of me, I'm using that for an example. I have to tell them I'm full, okay, unless you want to go to East Brunswick on Sunday, because I know I'm low over there. Nope, I'll go on the waiting list for Edison and people back out. Look, right now, that list is it's moving.
Very
I
fluid.
have people
Okay.
calling, they don't want to work anymore, there's still COVID fears, okay? And then there are people who want to work. So it's a very fluid list. And also I will say, I'll bet you not every single one of them show up. Because some of them are recalling me and asking me if they can work. And I said, but you're already scheduled to work. So, my guess is, all those people are not going to show up. So, having extras can't hurt.
Oh, I understand that, but having extras, couldn't you tell the extras that called you last to say you're an alternate, like I do that in my own town.
Yes.
You're an alternate, I'll call you, be ready at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'll call you.
There is a bunch of them like that. After that list, and I saw I was over, I have a list of alternates. Should I need them, I will absolutely call them. I told them be ready, because the night before I might be calling them.
I will get on my phone and I'll call people, my party, to get them to go, to see where they can go.
Let me say one thing positive. I think Tom had mentioned this. I had talked to I had some familiarity with some of the other counties. And that's why I was so pleased when I looked at this, because we are far, in terms of the early voting, we are far ahead of a number of counties. I don't have the specific things. It's other people that had talked to the counties, and when I told them where we were, they said, oh, well, you're way ahead. So that's a good thing. I'm not saying we're not driving you crazy. People aren't driving you crazy. The situation isn't driving us all crazy, but it's still, we are better than the situation than many other counties. So that part's good. But we just have to polish it and make sure we have what we're supposed to have ultimately.
Okay, can we move along to the next issue?
Oh, I do have the other part. Do we have the Republican and Democrat supervisor in these locations? Is that still fluid?
I have 5 responses from the Republican Party as to who they would prefer for a supervisor, and I have 2 from the Democratic Party.
Okay, so we're looking at the parties to see if we can recommend them.
I sent the list to the chairs and/or designees, and I asked for help in distinguishing bilingual and supervisors.
Right. I saw part of that from the other end, and someone
Yes,
shared that with
I
me.
did
So
do
we're
that.
so we're working on it. That's good. Okay. That's all I have on that early voting part.
Early voting? Okay, we'll move along. New business, administrative reports.
So did, within old business, that was the Challenger part? Oh, do you want to incorporate the Challenger?
I don't care where we talk about it, we should just talk about it so we decide what we're gonna do.
Okay, and you know, I kind of folded it underneath early voting, so if you want to talk about the early voting Challenger piece with that.
Why don't you explain what
Yeah,
you think?
and again, it's in your packets, and I had sent you an email a couple days ago, but just to summarize, so it's a early voting Challenger kind of law or piece, kind of prescribes the county chairs with assigning two challengers per early voting site, with candidates also being challengers, and then those that are off the line being able to appoint two challengers per early voting site. So again, you know, some fluidity to the law, it creates some issues potentially for staff in that having two per site, we could just see scenarios where substitutions and replacements are constantly coming into our office, because having two people at each site who can attend every day is kind of an issue. So Commissioner Katz kind of rightly pointed it out, and we kind of put forward a proposal. Commissioner Katz kind of had made a proposal that would allow some additional challengers from the local, the county, and the legislative branches of the ticket. I reached out to, kind of as a post, I reached out to both parties, and that, you know, kind of come to common ground. The Democratic Party was accepting of Commissioner Katz's kind of proposal for an at-large kind of assignment to early voting sites, similar to Election Day. So you would just get one list, and then anyone on that list would be able to go to any of the early voting sites, you know, with the appropriate certifications, and that it would reduce the number of substitutions that we would have to do with the board on a daily basis. But they kind of did balk at the additional challengers for local, county, and legislative, just on the idea of trying to balance who could be in an early voting site, because they kind of went to the law and said that the law kind of deigns that it limits it to two per grouping or bracketing or line. So they didn't want to exceed that, because they thought that it would kind of run against the law, and they thought it would be a little unwieldy trying to balance who can and can't be in an early voting site. And so, but both chairs found the proposal of at-large challengers for all the early voting sites, similar to what we do for Election Day, with the candidates themselves retaining the ability to be a challenger, which that didn't change, and anyone running off the line, the ability to appoint two challengers per early voting site. So that was accepted by, you know, both chairs. So again, I put it to you, so either we can, if you want to move to have a proposal to allow us to notify the chairs that they can submit a list like that, or if we want to retain the existing standards of the law, which would be two per polling locations appointed by the county chairman. So that's really a
Is the deadline
summation
for
of it.
both the 19th?
What's that?
The deadline is the 19th to submit challengers for both?
Correct.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's the 18th for the early voting, the 19th
David,
for
you had
everything else, just to
19.
make it further confusing.
Yeah.
But,
John, you had 19 in your newsletter.
yeah, that's the
Challengers.
deadline for filing for challengers for Election Day.
Yeah.
The
Not for early,
early
though.
voting,
Due date for the challengers
Yeah.
is the 19th.
yeah, the early voting law says 5 days before early voting starts, which would be the 18th.
The 18th.
Right.
Okay.
Not make it the same.
The issue that I'm trying to resolve are that, because according to the early voting law, I have lots of opinions about how this is drafted, but it's what's there. If they can submit, the local candidates can submit challengers, two challengers where they're on the ballot, but they're on the ballot in all 10 early polling places. And we don't want them, administratively for us, if, for example, I'll just take candidate A. There's one candidate that, I'll take in East Brunswick, there's one candidate for council in each party, and the candidate can appoint two challengers, theoretically, for all 10 places, polling locations, because they're on the ballot everywhere, right? We would prefer that they not do all 10.
That was
but
more-
but that was rejected, I guess. But the one thing that I think would be useful administratively for us is if this one candidate, for example, they can appoint two, that if they know they're going to have different people on different days, that they appoint them two for one particular day, and we can get all the certificates done, and because they already know there may be different people. So we don't necessarily want to keep making replacement certificates during the whole early voting period if we already know if they're going to be there. It probably would be easier if we say, okay, Mr. Candidate A or Ms. Candidate A, you can have two challengers in early, and preferably just to go the one that's closest to you. You have 9 days, you can have two people, but if you know you're going to have different people on different days, tell us all, and we'll make them a challenger for early voting site for that day only. So we have it to start with, instead of them going in and every day they replace, they got to come back to the board to switch to things. That's less, I think it would be less strain on our staff in terms of preparing that, and it certainly would be also less strain on the parties if they have to come in every day to keep changing it again, even when they know that in advance what it is. Does that either make sense or acceptable?
I thought the fluidity of your presentation was just going to avoid that, right? No?
Well, again, I would
Then
say
we
at
misunderstood.
least from
The
one of the
candidates
parties.
are actually entitled to, the individual candidates, in addition to the county at large, the individual candidates can have challengers. Because that's what it says, all right? I'm just trying to, my concept is to limit the number of places they're going to have individual challengers for, but the other part was, just on an administrative basis, if a candidate, maybe I wasn't clear, if a candidate can have two challengers, hopefully they will only assign them in the closest, the closest early voting site, but regardless of that, they got two challengers, there's 9 days. They're not going to have two people or even one of those people there for 9 days. They may have some people that will volunteer for a day, and they may know that in advance, and there's 9 different days. So if they know that in advance, I would suggest that us knowing, if they give us the names of them now, and they can be an early voting challenger for that candidate solely on day one, on one day, then we'll have it done beforehand, and we won't have to do a lot of substitutions during that time period. They won't have to come in.
We're not doing the substitutions.
But that's gonna be a lot for the staff to keep track of what challenges is
Exactly.
going on, what
And we don't do the
location.
substitutions.
Why won't we just provide them with credentials?
Well,
That's gonna be a nightmare to have to
so,
put the
but if
day.
I got an East Brunswick Republican Council candidate,
Yeah.
right? According to this,
Candidate automatic challengers.
Thank you.
fine. Well, yes, but I think are we admitting
Candidates
that they
automatic.
can come in and challenge without any credentials?
They
Yeah.
don't get
It's a
credentials.
candidate.
Candidates
Usually
don't
don't
get
get
credentials.
I know normally, they don't in general election.
Because we don't know who all the candidates are.
Yeah.
And to provide that credentials to every single candidate, that would not be,
You don't need separate credentials for that.
Are we accepting that any candidate, for the early voting law as well, that any candidate that's on the ballot can go into any early voting site on any day without credentials?
Other
Agreed,
than
as
their
long
own
as there are
Candidate credentials.
If I could just break it, as long as there are two, if there are two from each bracketed or grouped line in that location, then you would have to decide. And I think in my conversation was with the parties is that deference would be given to, like, if the county appointed two people, you know, A and B to be at the early voting site, and candidate A and candidate B came in, the deference would be given to the candidates to be on site during that period of time. At least that was my impression from the parties, how they would deal with that. So yes, I mean, if a candidate came in, they currently now don't need credentials to come in and be a
Right.
challenger at an election day site, so they wouldn't need it for early voting. But again, I think it's in order to manage the locations, limiting it to two per group line.
But that's another problem. There's no definition of group of candidates in the election law. The only thing that's even close is bracketing. If individual candidates bracket with other candidates for the same office, that's in election law. There's no such thing as grouping of candidates. It says that, but there's no definition of what that means.
Yeah.
And you can't bootstrap that and say grouping means everybody that's on the column. That's not necessary, it doesn't say it.
I mean, at least in my conversations with the AG's office is that the language is clear in terms of what it
Clear?
represents. Again, their interpretation, not mine.
So maybe I'm missing that. So what are you saying on that part of it?
But two people grouped together means bracketed or on the line underneath a party designation.
If they're bracketed, all right?
So the-
I have a council candidate, standalone candidate. East Brunswick, there is one council candidate. It's not bracketed with anybody because there's only one position.
Correct.
Right? So that candidate can appoint two challengers, essentially, in 10 sites. We're not going to do. I try to encourage them not to do that because it doesn't make a lot of sense, but they could.
So are you, can I just, excuse me, but you're saying, are you confusing early with
No.
election day?
I'm trying to,
Because 10 sites, they're not in 10 sites, because East Brunswick, I understand, I understand your
Yes.
point.
you could,
vote
anywhere in the
an
county.
East Brunswick voter
Can
can
go anywhere
vote
in
in
the county.
any one of the 10 voting
Right,
sites.
go anywhere in the county,
And the
right.
language in this early voting thing talks about where they're appointing challengers, where they're on the ballot. And in the early voting sites, they're on the ballot in each one of the early voting sites.
correct.
So that's what it says,
Sure.
all right? I don't want the candidates to appoint challengers, the local candidates to appoint challengers in each early voting sites, and hopefully none of them will. We're trying to keep them
Focus.
focused so we have less people. But the part I'm talking about is, we know if in fact you've got a hot race, whatever it is, they want to have a local candidate, Democrat, Republican, wants to have a challenger at the early voting site that's in their town or closest to their town, all right? But they're not going to have a volunteer work for 9 days. They may know in advance that they've got 9 different people that will work one each different day. I'm suggesting that if they want to do that, then we just appoint them for that, for the one, and they're a challenger at an early voting site for one day, whatever date that is. So they have the credentials, it's only good for that day. So we don't, while the early voting is going on, we don't have to have them come back when they already know it's not going to be the same person, to come back, and we have to prepare another challenger certificate to replace that one next day, and then have them come back and to replace the challenger certificate another day for someone else. I'm just trying to, administratively, if we get it done. Yeah, right, we don't want it to keep coming back, it's going to be.
You don't have to keep track of the specific day that they're going to be? Why can't the credential just say they're an early voting center challenger?
Challenger.
But
That's early voting
if you got a candidate that has it's right to have 2 challengers, right, for 9 days, they're not going to have 2 individual people for 9 days.
We don't know that, maybe they do. Whatever it is, you
But
have
if
the
they don't-
badges out there, the person goes in, if there's a problem at the voting site, then something else will be done to address it, and that'll
No,
be done.
they have to, if they're going to have a different challenger, someone's going to have to bring the other
They'll have the
credential back and
credentials.
change it.
Okay.
No, they'll have a credential with their name on it, and we know that they're only going to work, they know, for example, they're only going to work for 1 day, all right? The candidate or campaign has got a different person that's volunteered for the 2nd day, and a different person that volunteered for the 3rd day. If we don't take that and do something with that beforehand, then every day, even though they already know in advance that it's going to be different people, they're going to have to come back to our office, and we're going to have to take back the old credential, prepare a new one, hand it to them day 2, do the same thing day 3, all the way through day 9, even if they know in advance who's going to be there.
It's still a little easier from what I hear from Linda than trying to keep track of every day. That's really difficult. Like if you're asking an individual to schedule a day, that's hard. Let them come back and do the work.
But it also, on behalf of the parties and the campaigns, if they're doing that, that means if they already know, for example, that John Doe is going to be their challenger there on the first day of the early voting, and Jane Roe is going to be the 2nd day. After John Doe is finished the first day, someone's going to have to take his credential, bring it back to the Board of Elections on beginning of day 2. Our staff is going to have to replace it, then they go back out again, even though they know in advance.
But It's still easier than Linda trying to keep track of every day, that's a big.
To have to print credentials for all those,
bit, I guess.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, I understand that proposal. I just also think, you know, in some of my experience at least doing it, that the likelihood of the person getting it right, that the person on the 9th day is gonna be the person that they presume the person to be the 9th day, 2 weeks in advance or a week in advance, is possibly unlikely. So the whole exercise might ultimately be moot
Yeah.
if people do not have as organized of a system or of a grouping of names as you suppose they would.
Well, we also file them for election day, they just file them, and then they can go and, if this person's not gonna show up, they come and replace them, but they still, someone's gonna have to, they're gonna have to go back.
So if
I
we've
mean,
done all
both-
that
both
work in
ends of it's
advance,
gonna be- yeah.
and then it ultimately ends up being that
They
people
may
are
have to
coming in
do
to
it anyway.
rechange it anyway, it warrants the question of whether it was necessary to do it in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay, the suggestion I thought would be take some pressure off our staff during the early voting time for switching things.
Right.
And certainly also, certainly pressure off the various campaigns, if they know already beforehand it's gonna be different people, that every day they're gonna have to drive
Yeah,
to
no, I
East
get it.
Brunswick and bring it, get
Sounds
the old
fair.
certificate.
Seems like
from
the
the
staff
other
says
person.
it's more work, right?
Yes.
So,
and the
Okay.
municipal clerk will print credentials on election day.
But it's not a this is.
On
this-
election day.
That's,
If you mention election day.
that's,
on
no,
election
I'm
day.
dealing, election day is another story, we know that part. This is the early voting sites, we've got 10 early voting sites. Are we authorizing the municipal clerk to replace early voting
No, I said
credentials?
on election day.
Election day, so
It's
we're not,
mentioned election
so
day.
that's not what I'm talking about.
You
And the
mentioned
early,
it before.
early vote, for early voting challengers,
Right.
then any campaign or candidate that wants to replace somebody, even if they know or in advance, somebody will have to get the old credential on the prior day,
Correct.
drive to East Brunswick, get it replaced. And if they have one for each of the 9 days, every day they're gonna have to get the old credential, drive it to East Brunswick, get a new credential. That's
It's
tough.
easier than us keeping track of days that they're working and
Yes,
who's
it is.
working and who's coming and.
And who's
Well,
changing.
if you put it on, if you put it on a credential, if they don't give it back, they give it back to you, well,
Anyway,
okay.
anyway.
If that's fine. Nobody complained to me during the early voting period that they're swamped with the replacing
I
credentials.
think we'll have trouble having a challenge.
That's fine. This is, in my opinion, to be polite, the section of the early voting statute that relates to challengers being polite, it's inartistically drawn. I would say a lot stronger, but I'm not going to put that on the record. So I'm just trying to anticipate the issues and trying to resolve them to the extent we can. We have to operate in what we have. If that's not, if we don't want to do that part of it, that's okay. But just be prepared that we're going to have both potentially. Both the parties or candidates may be unhappy going back and forth, and our staff may be unhappy in terms of doing a lot more replacement certificates. If that's what the determination is, I have no problem with that. I was just trying to think we might be able to avoid some of it. That's all right, fine. It sounds like, Don, we humor you. It sounds like it might be a good idea, but we're not doing it. That's okay. Just keep in mind that when it happens, if it happens, then don't blame me if everybody's unhappy.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Moving
fine.
along, administrative report.
If I could circle back though, in terms of just the part about allowing the county chairs to appoint at-large challengers for the early voting sites. Are you guys comfortable with at least making that change so I can notice the county chairs and the public
So
of that?
what we would tell them, just to be clear, in Middlesex County, both parties get essentially 27, 25 under one section of law, one per municipality. There's another 2 under another section. So there's 27 at large. So we could submit, the parties can submit, Madam Democratic Vice Chair, you
Yes.
about that. So each party can submit 27 names and say they're at-large challengers both for early voting and for election day.
It could be, well, it would be, it
It
could be
is for
separate
election day
lists.
right now. We're talking about early voting.
Yes, I know,
Yeah.
but we're talking about
Correct,
covering
early
early
voting
voting.
is still election.
Yes, well,
It is,
I'm using, we're voting now under vote by mail as well.
but
I would say that you might have different lists for early voting challengers
want
at
to,
large, as I
But
understand.
you could do it either way.
I was gonna
As opposed to
say,
election day. But,
Right.
so I would say it could be two lists. I mean, the parties might come back and say we have the same list for early voting as well
Okay.
as election day, but.
and it probably will not be the
Probably not
27
be,
or the
but,
29 persons, in my opinion.
Uh,
But anyway,
No, we probably won't use them all.
but I don't want to get into debate.
That's fine.
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion to accept that proposal?
Yes.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Chairman Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Frankel?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
Yes.
Commissioner Mossler?
yes,
Commissioner Jones?
Aye.
Commissioner Frangione?
Yeah.
So Tom, I give you, personally, I give you the envious task of writing that in plain English and letting the parties know that.
Let's move along to the administrative reports. Steve, do you have an oral report?
Yes. The warehouse staff is predominantly right now over at the Heldridge, and we're taking care of co-worker training classes there. They will be coming back this weekend as we hopefully start LNA and logic and accuracy, and basically at that point is to test the validity of our voting machines and make sure everything is up to par. When that should be, I couldn't give a time frame as to when I expect that to be finished. It is a lot of work, and I'm not exactly sure, I've never done early voting before, and there's 36 ballot styles, so I could never tell you how long that's going to take. But I figured that out, I guess, because it's the first time for me. The warehouse has received the surplus of the poll books that were originally supposed to go to the main office, but obviously we don't have the space there, so we're just gonna hold on to them until they need it, so at least the order was shipped and we have them. And the last thing was we have two separate voting machine inspection dates for we have one for early voting. I put the dates on the report here.
okay.
So there's one for early voting and then one for election day. Only because, again, when I'm gonna start with the early voting machines because they have to go out first, and then I'll have a little bit of time in between to get the other ones completed as well. But both is basically before those machines have to be shipped, so I have a time frame. That's it.
Linda? Linda, you want to go over your report?
Yeah, so the data entry is pretty much up to date. We have the full-timers and the seasonals working on the mail-in ballots, and of course, poll workers. There's about 8 people working on poll workers. So the new system, ES&S is in the office today running the LNA on the current e-books that we have. And we have the data stress test today, but the ES&S knowing and the export and import of data into the e-book, from the e-book to SVRS. So it worked pretty well for us. Now we got the steps down pat. So we're pretty good with that. That was pretty interesting. The Agilis machine that we have, which is the machine that slices open the outer envelope. We take the ballots out, we run it through again, and it captures the signature that's on the mail-in ballot, and it sends it to the application. So when the employee sits at the computer, they're comparing the signature on the mail-in ballot to what's in SVRS. So that's working pretty well. We had a couple of steps that we weren't sure about, but we worked closely with Runbeck and Mike Nyers, he's been running the machine with the guys, so we're getting our processes down pat. It's a little different than what we have now. It was more manual before, so now it's more, digital signature. So we're kind of working out the steps. It's working out pretty well. We're getting caught up with all that. That's the two major things that we're working on. That's what I have.
Linda, did you want to ask about the ballot challenge review dates?
The due dates. Talk about the review dates. I put that in your packets, the important dates. So the first review for the public is listed October 20th. There's all review dates in there. Then the hearing with the commissioners, the first hearing is on election day. But we're talking about the signatures. Right now we have 11 mail-in ballot signatures that don't match. It was determined they don't match. That's held for commissioner review. So we need to discuss when you want to come in and look at those.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, it's not on this list,
Is
because
there any requirement that we, in the executive order for 2020 election, we had to come in once a week?
once a week.
Is that still in effect?
That was just particular to that executive order for that
2020, so
election.
we don't have to do that.
We don't have to do once a week, but it does, in the guidelines, it just says you should come in before the election to adjourn.
Yes, yeah.
So if you wanted, and me and Linda were talking, if you wanted to come in maybe once a week prior to the election on a day that works for some people who have schedules.
Your guess is that in terms of sufficient numbers, it do we need once a week?
We have 11 right now to look at, 11 ballots.
Okay, I mean, there's obviously what we're getting, we have 55,000 max pretty much of both the mail ballots coming in
Yeah, we were
versus.
talking about
No.
Friday.
The percentage review is very low though,
Yeah.
right? Very
The
low.
what?
Percentage review of the returns of these ballots
Yeah.
is terrible because we didn't get them early enough.
Like I was mentioning to you with the Agilist, we're still working out the kinks for this machine, so we've already looked at the signatures. So far, we have about 4 or 5 more trays that we have to run through. So now that we got our steps down, it's going faster. So we don't know if there's gonna be any more signatures until that's done. So we were talking about Friday. You guys coming in Friday to review the signatures? Next Friday.
Next Friday, okay.
Or a date later in the week that works,
Yeah.
a time that works for you.
What
The
time,
end of the
Linda?
week is busy with mail, so the end of the week is better.
We do Thursday the 14th?
Nope.
Okay.
What time of day, Linda?
Whenever you come in, we'll be ready. Oh, I believe Valerie, we're coming here, right? Yeah.
Tom,
I
Wednesday, Dan?
Yeah, because there's
You want to
no.
do Wednesday?
I think Wednesday's fine.
13th, 20th, 27th?
13th, I have a
Straight down?
problem with them, but Weaver and I got a contractor that I have to babysit.
A contractor?
We just asked not Monday, because Mondays are busy mail days,
No,
so.
of course.
Friday works for me.
But we all have to be there.
Quorum.
Well,
Quorum. No, you need quorum. You don't need-
which means we need 4, if we can get 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats that can definitely come in, that could work. So it's a question of what we want to do, right? I mean, Friday works, Friday the 15th works for me. 14th, are we talking the afternoon or?
No, the 14th is.
Well, I
said
know,
no.
well, it's just a question of whether we got,
Oh, whether you need
whether
me
we
or
got,
not.
whether we got,
You know
whether we
you-
got 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans that say, yes, this works. If we got that, then we can.
So why don't we circulate, let's do this. Why don't
Yes.
the commissioners take from the second week, the
Wednesday,
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
Yeah.
and send your availability to
To whom?
whom?
You want to send it to me and then?
Send it to
Okay,
Tom,
Yeah.
okay?
shall we assume a
So
start
say-
time of what?
Next week.
And
No,
again-
start time of the day, because that might affect.
Again, if it's, I defer to.
I guess how do
Commissioner
people
Franco
feel
and-
first thing in the morning or later, what's people feeling is first thing? Say, let's say 9 o'clock in the morning or
Of course.
4:30 in the afternoon or something. So in other words, give your choice either 9 o'clock or 4:30.
I would defer
You start by
to-
9 o'clock here?
I'd rather 4:30. Oh, wait, wasn't my choice.
Friday.
Yeah, I won't be able to do mornings,
9 o'clock.
Monday through Wednesdays, I prosecute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thursdays and Fridays, I'm pretty
You
open,
didn't
pretty
give up
flexible.
Well, let's put it that way. It's a puzzle. You got a quorum,
Yeah, can we say,
just
yeah.
plug in.
All right, we'll just send it.
Can we say like 4
Yeah.
o'clock if we're doing it in the afternoon?
That's fine.
Okay, and then I'll do the same thing for the following weeks and see if we can come up with
Yeah.
a
Do it all at once now for
Whatever we have
3
to
weeks.
do. Yeah, then we can all plug it in and see what we do.
Yeah, for two.
Well, I know, but for now, let's get the 3 weeks of October in so we can.
Yeah,
And then when you do, I'll work with Valerie
Right.
to secure this
so,
space.
so are you gonna send us an email, say, tell us this, and then we send it all back to you?
Exactly.
Fine. Perfect.
As long as the chair.
To the extent anything in this situation can be perfect, that's perfect.
How long did those meetings usually take, just so?
Depends how many.
Depends on how
ballots we
many
look at.
ballots.
I mean, would it take like more than 3 hours?
It has.
Okay. I'm just trying to think if it comes.
No, I'm serious, not all, but it has.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're talking about our experience with the general election, the signatures, we had 400,000 or 500,000 people got the ballots. They didn't all send back, it was several 100,000 sent back. In this instance, we're dealing with probably a maximum of 50,000 sending it back. So
We'll
we're
have
talking
fewer.
about, the likelihood is maybe
Commissioner,
1/6 of what we've had to deal with in last November.
Commissioner Benjavenga, we can let you know like the day before how many you
Right.
possibly to kind of review and see how
So
many
you
games.
basically, you want us to let you know Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays for the next few weeks, right?
Yeah,
Up until Election Day.
right.
Okay.
And there'll be something after that too. We have
We'll
to,
have to do
Yes.
that again. Okay.
After that, but that's different.
on Election Day, we're all there.
Okay,
let's
Your
go.
calendars.
start really early.
Administrators report?
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman. I'll just go quickly. I mean, most of it's is on there. I'll just hit the high points. In terms of staffing, again, Linda talked about we have some seasonals. They're doing, a lot of them have prior experience. So again, we didn't really need to train them all that much, except for some brush ups. They're doing a great job. We have some additional seasonals will be joining us, both as Dropbox as well as permanent seasonals. For Election Day, I did want to highlight this, is that we had spoken in August about ballot openers, and that the game plan would be to recruit in the neighborhood of 140, 160 people open ballots on Election Day, with 100 people starting on Election Day, and then kind of having an overlay of additional people who can work later in the day and supplement people who do not show up, which happens, as well as people who leave towards the later part in the afternoon.
Right.
I do want to highlight that because it can be a challenge because of the increase in the poll worker pay, which we experienced in the primary last year. As a number of people who said to us that there were going to be ballot openers, instead when it went off and decided they prefer to be poll workers instead. So Maria is going to work on making sure that the people who confirm to us that they're going to open ballots are also not getting trained to be poll workers, so we have a true number. And thank you for authorizing her to go through and start reaching out to the people who work in the primaries ballot openers to see if they would again be ballot openers for this election. But I would urge the commissioners and through the county chairs and local chairs, as many names as possible, because we'll need to over-recruit for that effort.
So the goal for Election Day is to have how many boards?
50 boards operating throughout the day.
That's 50 starting at what time?
As early as we can. We talked about 6 a.m.
So you're going to start people working at 6 a.m. here?
Yeah.
Boards.
And Tom,
Here.
where's it going to be? Here?
Here. What's that? We said 6
Yeah.
a.m. With the idea that it is opening, getting all the ballots counted before 8 o'clock and tabulated.
I'm sorry, we have to slice open those envelopes first, so staff would have to be here that early, or earlier.
Earlier.
Yeah, we were talking about the time, but we need to open. We've had issues in terms of, either the ballot style or something else, getting started as early as possible so we get them all counted before 8 o'clock.
The 100, is that 50 and
Well,
50?
No, that's 50 boards, so
Yeah, but 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats?
50
is
and
that-
50 and 50, which is what we've kind of aimed for the last
Let's go
couple of
back in terms of the timing. 2020 was very different because everybody was paper, so we always had to do that. 2019 was the normal, the most recent normal vote by mail numbers we've had. How long and do we have many more people on a permanent vote by mail list or getting vote by mail ballots now than in 2019?
I think the total number of ballots that are out currently is 111,000, and that,
111,000?
yes,
Twice the number of the early voting? I mean, twice the number of there's 111,000 mostly on permanent voting, vote by mail?
the county clerk has mailed out 111 mail-in ballots for this election.
111,000?
Yep.
That's more than 19.
That's more than twice what we did
Well, that's,
the
yeah.
last time.
Yep.
So what's wrong with that?
No, it's just, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just, to me, it's an unusual increase, which is okay.
So Maria, are you doing 2 shifts that day, or are you doing someone staying from 6 and they're going to stay till 8 o'clock?
Well, the idea would be is they would stay from 6 until the ballots are done, and that we would have kind of like an afternoon shift that would kind of come in. Because again, we have no shows. If we schedule 100 people, we know random people who don't show up. So again, having an extra list to be able to start people to come in at that time.
But my problem is that you're still losing time from your morning shift when people don't show up.
Yeah.
So if anything, you should go even for more boards in the morning. Okay, go up to 100, go up to at least 60 boards in the morning, and then come in with another 35 or 40 in the afternoon. Because if 60, you're right, they're not going to show up. We've seen it every year. We say we're going to have them, and they don't show up. And then we get way behind.
Well,
So my suggestion would be is you get more boards in the morning shift, a lot more boards in the morning shift, double the amount than you would in the afternoon shift.
Yep.
So I'd really like to have 60.
Okay.
I don't have a feeling, so.
And Tom, do this have to go through
Is
the
that
county?
required?
The three holders, the county commissioners?
Yeah, I mean,
They
they would have
have to
to
be
be, they would have to be submitted to the county as they normally would. But it's really just a bulk.
No drug test,
No.
That what?
no drug test.
But what, and I didn't even think of that. Do we have any rulings on that in terms of
We haven't done drug tests.
vaccinations?
We haven't done drug tests for our.
Vaccinations, just the COVID.
What's that?
We have any wording regarding COVID for people who are working for
No
us?
requirement from the county or from the state for COVID testing, other than just the existing guidelines in terms of operating.
I'm sorry?
There's no requirements from the state or the county in terms of testing for COVID prior to.
Wow.
Why wouldn't we do that?
What's
What
that?
about our staff? I'm concerned about that. I
Yeah.
really am.
I'm
I
sorry, I'm
think
asking
I think they
now.
should be COVID tested or show up a vaccine. I don't think they should be here. It's my personal opinion.
You mean
I get-
workers?
Workers. I got the staff,
We have
I
trouble
got,
getting 100 as it is.
well,
We're gonna
I'm
have
serious.
a real
I'm
problem
not gonna
getting
take the
the
chance
people.
with our staff, okay? If they're not showing that they're tested with a negative test, or if they're showing they have a vaccine. I don't think we put the staff at risk. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I really don't want to.
Yeah, it's a concern, there's no doubt.
Well,
We're
it's
gonna have trouble
100%.
getting people anyway.
The 100-person staff
Look at the trouble we're having with poll workers.
I know that.
that the governor
Yeah, I
is
was
addressing,
gonna say, it's no different than the poll worker trainings we're dealing with right now.
which is,
And it doesn't matter who they are, they're coming in and we're training them, so
Steve,
we're exposed.
I appreciate that, I appreciate what you're doing, but we also were very fastidious last year about making sure that, you know,
Yep.
if our staff goes down, we're down, okay? And you're probably taking more of a risk than you should be right now,
yes.
okay? And although I appreciate it, I think it's wrong.
But it's crazy that I just thought to ask the question
I know.
now, and we're what, 3 weeks away from election time? We should
Change your social
have made some
distance.
statement beforehand.
Yes, we can.
I apologize.
And the county can easily set up the place to get a COVID test
There's
before.
enough space.
If we're looking for the number of, just to be aware, if we're looking for the number of people that we're looking for, because we're dealing with 111,000 vote by mail ballots, or potentially that number, it's going to be, we're going to be eliminating, we're going to be making it more difficult to get our people, and I think we're likely not to get them. So just be aware of that. I mean, at the same time, Dan, we're looking for more boards, but at the same time, if we put more hurdles in front of getting them, then we're not likely to get them.
Don,
I'm just-
anybody in business today, okay, is being very sure about COVID. At least they can get a test. We can set up, from the county point of view, set up a testing site that these people can be tested, or they can go to any place, they go to Walgreens or CVS or anything to get tested. Okay, I don't know. You know what, you guys can decide, but I'm telling you,
Is the
my,
test free at workers?
It's free, it's free.
Decision that we make. The
I don't think
governor
they should be in here.
Governor has to make that decision.
We can make it as a board. The governor doesn't make the decision. We can make this as a board.
What about the current seasonals?
I have a
What
problem
about
with
the
that.
current employees?
Linda, I have a problem with the current seasonals not being either tested once a
You
week.
walk in that office, we're jam-packed.
I have a problem if they're not tested once a week. If they don't have a vaccination
Do that
card,
here.
I have a problem if they're not tested once a week.
And that really doesn't cover you.
If they don't have the
I,
vaccination.
well, with a vaccination, you can get, look,
You get COVID.
listen, anything can happen. You can walk off the curb and you can get hit by a car, okay? It's just, are the seasonals tested?
They're not required to be tested by us, no.
And our staff isn't required to be tested. We haven't determined anything that our staff, we are not, I'll have to repeat it as I've been repeating it since 2004, we are not a department of the county. Our staff is not, there's no requirement that our staff be fully vaccinated. There's no requirement that our staff be tested if they're not weekly or something if they're not vaccinated. So this is not necessarily anything different.
The current standard for our employees is that they do have to share whether or not they are or not vaccinated. But
Yeah.
there's no requirement for
Right, so
vaccination or testing.
that's a different issue.
And
But
what
the rest of
do you
it's
do
the same.
what do you do with persons who are not vaccinated? Nothing.
Yeah, you have to fill out a daily form.
We have a questionnaire.
If you're not sick, it's not
No, but they're not isolated from everybody else.
What's going to be in here in this room?
No, upstairs in the cafeteria. We
The-
do have,
The big room.
yeah, we couldn't get it for
We
full
can
worker training, but
actually
we can
separate
use it
them out.
for vocabulary.
I would say that our seasonals and the ballot openers should not be treated any stricter than our regular staff is treated, because that doesn't make any sense to me.
We do have to fill out a question
Yeah,
on the app.
I can make a request of county health in terms of how to approach that group of people. If it is kind of like they have to fill out the app before, they have to affirm that they haven't been exposed or
I mean, at the very least, all of the people, other people should have to go to at least the level that we replace their regular staff. If that's what our regular staff is, then we should require that, the same thing in terms of the questionnaire, et cetera. But I don't see how we can require people that we're hurting to get more people to run through more hurdles than our staff is have to go
Well,
through.
we can mandate masks, correct?
You said yes with the mask.
Well, then,
The college requires face masks.
that's the college, but not your office.
Oh, the office does.
County building, okay, well, that's something. It's okay.
Are you questionnaire every day as a staff member? You have to fill out a questionnaire every day?
Yes.
Yes, and I get the list of whoever answers it from our office. I get the list of all the employees who went in and answered that questionnaire.
Every day.
Every day.
Wow.
We're directed to go on the app, and there's a questionnaire that you have to fill out. If you have any of these symptoms, you cannot. So we do this every day. My people do it every day, they're instructed to do it. I also, just like Linda, will get a spreadsheet sent to me from,
And the seasonal do it?
Yes.
Oh, then I think the ballot openers should do it too.
Yeah, yes, then we'll have the,
You should ask.
I can ask the county in terms of incorporating it.
and if they don't, but if they're really working for a day, they may or may not download the app. If they don't download the app, then they can fill in a hard paper copy.
Yeah, we can have,
So
like,
we should have
If
somebody out there
that's what it
doing
says, then
it.
they're gonna do it more likely than not. That's what we're saying, is put together the paperwork.
Yeah,
I
if
think
they
for
want
me, it's
work,
better
they'll
to
fill
do
it
the
out.
paper, so as they come in, they can fill it out.
Exactly.
yeah.
Instead of waiting for, because I get an email, so instead of waiting for an email saying, hey, they answered it, it's probably better handing out the paper before they
Okay.
enter the
So
room.
it's every person.
But
that
it's
way-
got to
that
be
way.
before they enter the room.
That way.
Yes.
They're
Okay.
not granted access until they fill out that application, or
Yes.
the form.
And what are the questions like?
Steve, what are the questions,
Waiting for
Steve?
them to come in?
Do you have a fever?
I just asked.
It is-
Have you been exposed?
I'm supposed to do this with no glasses.
Give it to your mother.
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
Go ahead, Ms. Scroller. Question one.
It asks you if you have any fevers or chills, headache, repeated shaking with chills, no loss, any loss of taste and smell,
Basic questions, yeah.
cough, sore throat, shortness of breath, the usual basics, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, muscle or body aches, diarrhea, congestion, or runny nose.
That's,
Which if,
there's more.
then it goes to number 2. Have you ever been in contact with anybody and close contact that had the virus in the past 14 days? Then it goes on to, if you did, if you're isolating, quarantine, whatever, same thing. Just like any other.
It's like 6 questions.
Yeah.
It's the similar things that most of us have seen in doctor's offices or.
Yeah, it's basically all the same questions if you were going to a like I just left the hospital and they ask you the same thing.
Commissioner John?
Yeah, there was a question, is the county health officer chimed in on anything like this at all, or?
No, but I, based off of this conversation, I could circle back about how to,
I'm
for
interested in
last
thinking-
year.
Seeing what their recommendations.
Yeah, I mean,
and
for-
self-reporting, considering a 14-day incubation period can be moot, right? Because today I feel great, but I was exposed yesterday, and no one that I was exposed with has any knowledge of that, right? But this is a hypothetical. No one, hypothetically speaking, I was exposed today, and no one that I was with yesterday is exhibiting any symptoms, but they were all exposed 2 days before that, and so on and so forth. All of that self-reporting is useless, whereas masks have proven to be, 90% effective if used properly.
I mean,
So I'd be interested, and again, I'm no scientist or doctor, I live with one though. But I'd be interested in seeing what the health officer suggests, and I think that that's probably, under the circumstances, under our circumstances, I think that would be, some recommendation we accept.
I will sort of, I mean, the standard for the primary was all election board workers and openers were to wear masks.
Right.
We had a temperature taker at the beginning of every day. And so, but I will circle back to the Department of Health and ask them to kind of review this and see if there's an additional step that we need
But I
to
mean,
provide.
if possible, I certainly agree that if everyone, if we could make a situation where everyone showed a vaccination card, or there was a rapid test that could show negative, in the parking lot, that would all be great. I just don't know if doesn't sound possible or practical under circumstances, but certainly something to look into, right?
Sure.
How did you do it last November?
For what? For the ballot?
How did you do it last November?
Well, there's
When
no
you were in the
vaccine.
height of COVID, how did you-
Yeah, temperature.
Temperature check.
All right. And it was higher, the rate was higher last time. I think if we just take all precautions like you did last time.
Yeah, and then,
voted by now.
yes, but we're talking about.
No, we're talking about the opening
ballot.
of
We
the
had
ballots
We had
and
people
stuff.
opening the ballots and counting them here.
So can we get a temperature checker?
Yeah, all right.
I wrote it down.
Okay, anything else you want to report on, Tom?
Before anybody even got vaccinated, like, when did they get vaccinated? We're just starting vaccinations, right? So a lot of people weren't even vaccinated.
No, I mean, I'll just, if there are any comments from the report, but I'll leave it as it was written.
Okay. You can read it.
Just got that.
That's it? All right, Commissioner comments?
Just, I mean, everybody knows that the poll clerks pay has been increased by executive order, not everybody. Have been increased by executive order to $300 on regular election day and commensurate for the hourly. So the ones that were at, it looks like 50%. So I'm assuming the people that were making on the early voting $14 and change per hour are now going to be making $21 and change per hour. And I'm assuming the supervisors, which were making $21 and change per hour, will be increased by 50% to about $30 and change per hour, just so everybody knows that part. The executive order also included one other thing that might be useful for people in that the governor also, by order, removed the restriction on poll clerks working out of their own county. Probably everybody knows, but this way we should make sure that anybody that's still recruiting poll clerks knows both of those items. That's all I have to say.
public comments. Charlie? 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Charles Cradville, New Brunswick, editor of New Brunswick Today, community newspaper available online at newbrunswicktoday.com. I think I know the answer to these two questions, so I'm just going to ask to prove the point. Is there a representative of the county clerk's office here today?
No.
Is there a representative of ES&S here today?
No.
Okay. I do think that, constructive, that would be best to have them here, as obviously, they're deeply involved in what you're all doing, and it would just make sense, especially since these are monthly meetings. It's not that hard to make arrangements for them to send someone, and I'm disappointed that hasn't happened yet, but I will persevere. I have hope. So I heard you said that you'll start having the signature review next Wednesday. Is that correct?
13, 15, was it?
The commissioners, we have to determine the dates, Charlie.
We didn't
So we will
set-
Didn't set.
sometime,
We didn't settle on.
likely we will start Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday of next week, and then someday each week after that through election day.
That's fine. And if I could just ask, as a courtesy, can the Board of Elections let me know when the meeting is in advance? Just shoot me a quick email with the agenda, date, time, location. That's all I'm asking for. Is that too much to ask, or can I get that courtesy?
I think we could send you the list of all the times that we'll be meeting prior to the election.
I would appreciate that, and, reiterate my request to just get, a little reminder about the meetings and a copy of the agenda, so I don't have to ask for it, and so I don't miss the meeting if something gets scheduled without my knowledge, because I can try to check the website every day, but it's best if you could just notify me. I'd really appreciate it. Wanted to ask about the logistics for voters. I heard somebody say that it would be helpful if you bring your sample ballot with you to the polls. Is that something you're recommending, or is that going to speed up the process at all with the new machines?
Yes, for the express poll book, if you bring your sample ballot, it would have a barcode which would be associated with your voter ID, and so as part of it, you can scan it and it would bring up your information automatically and would speed up the process.
But by law, the voter is still required to tell the poll clerk their name and address. That's what the law provides.
So yes.
It might be easier to process it if they have that.
So if you have it, bring it.
If you
guess-
have it, bring it. It would quicken up the process.
Speed it up.
I wanted to ask about I heard 36 ballot styles. Does that mean that there's more than 25 different ballots for this election? Is that because of fire district elections, or?
Ward candidates.
Wards, okay. Wanted to ask about the logistics for counting the votes. I know there were some unfortunate problems with previous elections. Are the secure communications lines installed for all of the municipal clerk's offices so that they can actually transmit the data to the county, or?
Yes,
All 25?
yes.
Okay. So there won't be a situation where ES&S staff is shuttling USB drives to have the official votes?
Well, I mean, you could in any election have a stick that is not reading properly. It needs to be transmitted. I mean, that happened the last time, but that's a non-usual occurrence.
Okay. A lot of the issues I was going to bring up were already addressed thoroughly. I did want to, just not to throw a wrench into the challenger thing, but you mentioned off-the-line candidates can get 2 per early voting site. What about ballot questions? Are those folks also entitled to get 2 challengers?
Yes, so ballot questions, I think it's even referenced in the language I gave you, that for public questions, it's 2 per side.
If it's, I don't know in terms of separately early voting, but if it's consistent with the regular election law for election day, the answer would be yes. Otherwise, but I don't know, I haven't read that part of it.
I assumed, but I just wanted to get it on the record. Same-day voter registration is a policy that would improve access to voting if folks could just show up on election day. Can you tell me how the new equipment and all the changes that have happened, is that making it possible one day, if the law allows, for same-day registration, or is that going to make it harder or not possible for same-day voter registration to be achieved here in New Jersey, which many other states have?
I don't know, because we're too focused on early voting and everything else.
not sure.
And basically not sure. I mean, if the legislature makes the change, then we'll have to confer with our vendor what's available.
Okay. And always count on the timekeeper. I'd like the other 3 minutes if you'll allow.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. So I do want to point out just some of the discussion here. To me, it strikes me as pointing out the absurdity of the partisan system we all have. It's not anybody's fault in this room, but, you know, there's a built-in assumption to a lot of these laws that if you have a Democrat and a Republican overseeing things, that everything will be fair, or that is, you know, gonna make sure everything's okay. But as has been pointed out, people can change their party. You know, just because, you know, I might be a registered Democrat, that doesn't mean that other registered Democrats agree with me, or that we're all going to support each other, or whatever it is that we're working on. And I do think that this system oppresses and suppresses people who are not in the two major parties, which is a huge number of people who are unaffiliated and independent. So I just hope that you'll all keep that in mind as we approach these problems that you know, we're all working on. And then the last thing, I just wanted to rehash some of the issues with the primary. Problems with the sample ballots for a district. Folks in one district were sent the wrong ballot. Provisional ballots without bubbles. And then the issue that I know the two new commissioners probably don't know fully about, because I spoke about it before you were installed. But I went to vote with my girlfriend. We live in the same house, we're both registered, we voted in prior elections, Ward 2, District 1 in the city of New Brunswick. When we got there, her name was in a different book for a different district, and apparently that issue affected some other people. And I wanted to follow up and see the extent of it. Was this something that happened you know, to more people in New Brunswick, to others elsewhere in the county, and you know, what's being done to prevent it from happening again?
I can answer. Part of it is that, yeah, so the issue lay with SVRS in terms of the old legacy system and the current environment, and that people imported from legacy into the current environment. There were times where the geocoding didn't align in terms of where people were supposed to be assigned to vote. So that was something that's been identified, that you identified, and Commissioner Katz, you brought in a couple of people as well. So I know that staff went through all the iterations and then shared those instances where there could possibly be differences between households with the clerk to make the determination in terms of which district, where you had two people live in the same house where they were in different districts, which district it would be the correct one to correct that in the system. So I know I can't speak to the rest of it, but Linda, would you be able to kind of finish my thought there?
Yeah, we got the list back from the clerk's offices, and we're making the changes in the system. We're currently in the process of doing it, then notifying the voters that were changed.
Okay, great, thank you. Can you just tell me an approximate number of voters affected?
I don't, do we have, no. Because we have to give it to the clerks, and they have to give us back if there was an error.
Then we have to remove the good people
Yes.
to keep the ones that might have had a problem, and then there's 25 separate towns, and then different spreadsheets. I don't have a number.
Is it more than 100?
More, yes.
Okay, so I'm glad I brought this up. I think this is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. What's that?
I'd say we're finish up what you're
Yeah,
doing.
okay, that's all. Just thank everybody for their work. Have a good one.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Accept the motion to adjourn?
yep,
So move to adjourn.
second,
Second.
roll call.
Chairman Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Frank?
Yes.
Commissioner Katz?
Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Zella? Commissioner Wentz?